Good afternoon, everyone. The outpouring from friends via email and Facebook has been remarkable, but from the people of Anguilla, it's been monumental. Phone calls, hugs, offers of help or food, or just checking to see how I'm doing. Even if we did not know you well, or maybe I didn't remember your name, it did not matter. Your care and concern continues to this day. A few days before Paul died, we talked about the people of Anguilla and said, where in the world can you go? You go into a shop, you're walking the sidewalk, you're walking the road, and from age 2 to 90, you could be guaranteed you'd be greeted with a smile and a good morning. And there's no other place that we have ever been to where that was the way life was lived. And it's a healthy, smart way to live. Even driving down the road, if you saw someone walking or biking, you'd get a wave, you'd get a smile. And that's very, very special. No one truly dies until they are forgotten. And as evidenced by the turnout today with more coming, that is the case here. For those of you who are streaming in Canada, the US, and Europe, unfortunately you can't have one of these programs. But if you email me, although it'll take me a while because I have almost 1,000 emails in my inbox right now, there is a list of where we've traveled and a zillion photos, and somehow I hope to be able to get that online so that you can enjoy these photos. I will not attempt to comment and identify all the people who have provided assistance, who have cared, who have reached out. However, there are a few I absolutely must identify. I'm going to start with Marcella Guns. Marcella provided Paul with her special chicken soup for many, many weeks. Paul, what do you want? Marcella's soup. And yes, and husband Charles, he has been my Paul replacement. Poor Charles. I think Marcella and Charles may be considering moving because I live very close to them. And I go by and I stop, or I honk, or I give them a list, or I send an email, or I make a phone call. And Charles is always there with his creative genius, doing little things and big things for me. Such as, an example, if you saw the Paul signs coming in today, I wanted to make sure everyone knew the way to get to us. And he did that, of course. I don't think Charles has ever said no when I have asked him to do something for me. Another person I need to identify, and I don't see her here, and that's Judy Guthrie, Canadian artist on island. And she has donated a painting that she did that Paul loved. And she is donating this painting to ARF, our Animal Rescue Foundation, for their fundraiser. And on the program you'll see this painting of the sea. This is Judy's magnificent painting. I need to also comment on the fact that Premier Webster took time from his busy, crazy schedule to sit down with me very short time ago and listen to me while I talked to him about Paul's experience here at the hospital, because the Premier is in charge of healthcare on this island. And not only did he listen and take some notes, he also provided some assistance with Paul's medications. So I thank him immensely for doing that for me. I then need to introduce to you two couples. One, Chad and Sabre Dunn, who flew in from Oklahoma amidst tornadoes and storms just for 3 nights here for this weekend. That's a long haul. And also Tish Long and John Skibitsky, who flew in from Virginia just for this weekend. I would like the 4 of you to please stand and just wave so we know who you are. The 4 of them were all former guests at my lovely, magical La Petite Maison d'Amour, and we are still friends. One of the most moving examples of the generosity and kindness of Anguillians has come in the form of a song written for Paul the day after he died. Not only did Evan Webster create this homage, he has helped me in a multitude of ways to make this event happen today. So I'm asking Evan to come forth and sing this marvelous song he created for Paul.
Paul was my brother, really my brother. And actually, I'm wearing Paul's shirt. Really, this is Paul's shirt, but this is Evan's shirt. The song says it all, but Paul, and I know Karen for over 20 years, and then I got to know Paul, so they became part of our family, and they are my family forever. And I really love these nice people. So we wrote this song, and I performed it with my children, and I hope you enjoy it. $5,538 in terms of chaos, the distance from CA to AXA, but we became best of friends. We rode through the jungle, climbed the Rocky Mountains high, with the wind in our hair. He called me cowboy. He called me cowboy, and that brought me joy. Paul always had my back, and I his, that's a fact. Brothers, tell me, oh, I'm missing you, my friend, but your memory I'll recall. He called me cowboy. Legacy has been made. Paul's heart and hands didn't break. hat goodbye. He called me cowboy. He called me cowboy. That brought me joy. Paul always had my back, and I guess that's a fact. Brothers till the end. Oh, I miss you, my friend, but your memory I'll recall. He called me cowboy. All your memory I'll recall. 'Cause you called me cowboy. You called me cowboy. Goodbye, Paul.
Thank you, Evan. For those of you who may not have read or seen Paul's obituary, very briefly, he was born in London, Ontario, Canada. His mom always claimed that as a newborn, he was so independent even when he was born that he walked home from the hospital. It was certainly an early indication of his independence. He lived and worked in London all of his life until 2004, when he moved to the country into what was to be his retirement home. He was a sailor, he was a skier, he planned trips to Europe for himself and his buddies to ski. His street name here was Pancho and Pablo, but in Canada it was Corf and Corfy Wharfy. So how did this Canadian meet this American? In 1999, Paul and his wife rented my magical La Petite Maison d'Amour, that little West Indian house in Elsie Bay. I was not on island during their visit, but I had a photo album of the construction of that house, one of the happiest times in my life, bending and cutting steel, doing mortise and tenon and peg construction, and mixing concrete, and it was a joy. And in the October of 2002, I turned 60 that year and planned a birthday trip to Africa. And I did that trip on my own. I planned it so that I would sleep on the Kalahari Desert under the full moon, which is exactly what I did. I had been alone for 10 years at that point, following the loss of my 47-year-old partner. But on this trip, I became somewhat enchanted by two Swedish journalists, males. I had not been with men for a very long time, so it was fun to have this company. And when I returned to Washington, D.C., to my job at the Library of Congress, I decided that 10 years was long enough to be without male companionship. I joined a gym, and I decided to put myself on Facebook, on Match.com. And sometime later, when Paul and I were communicating, I read to him the description I put on Match.com. 40 adjectives I used to describe that man I wanted. And Paul just laughed at me and said, "That man does not exist." So in December, I received Paul's annual Christmas card. I always did that exchange with my guests. And once again, it was a photo of Paul and his wife. And I'd seen the photo before. It did nothing for me. But this particular December, I liked the way he looked. And I kept that Christmas card on my kitchen counter for months. Even though I had no idea what the future would bring, it was still there. So in March, I received a letter from Paul. The envelope felt ominous, And he wrote to tell me that his wife had gone to work one day, collapsed, and died at age 50. He also had a sister who died at age 32. The way he coped with this huge loss was to reach out to others who had experienced similar losses. He had remembered from my photo album, when they stayed there in '99, I had a photo album of the construction process, and in it was a picture of the man I had been with for 17 years who had died, and Paul always remembered how horrific that was. That you have this dream, and you're fulfilling this dream, and one of you dies. And so when I got this letter, I picked up the phone and called him. I had gone through intensive training in DC to volunteer with people who were actively dying or grieving, and also did similar training with hospice. And so we chatted a bit, and for the next several months he would occasionally call me, and vice versa, or once in a while there would be an email. And I do remember that in June of that year I was in Stockholm following up on these Swedish journalists. And I remember going to a cafe and sending him an email. He said, well, this is a disaster. So, but I'm okay. A few months after, in September, he contacted me and said, I would like to meet you. I want to thank you for all you have done for me. I felt I hadn't done anything for him. But I said, sure. So we met in Rhode Island. He flew in from Canada. I flew up from DC. I knew I was going to like this guy. I just knew it. But anyway, we walked the beach, we ate out, we had fun. But at one point, he said to me, how old are you? So I just blurted out. I had not planned my response. I said, well, on Anguilla, I feel 7. I have the wisdom of a 90-year-old. I feel 35, but my body is 61. And he was 46. He did not gulp, he did not collapse, he did not pass out. He just kind of ingested my response. And in retrospect, I'm sure that he loved my response. He was planning to go to Australia at that point. Check it out, maybe start a new life there. So when we said goodbye at the airport, I said to him, look, you're going to meet some Aussie and get married. Just invite me to your wedding, please. And I figured, okay, this is fun, this is nice. He's a great guy, but he's going to Australia. Well, a day and a half later, my phone rang. And it was Paul saying, I'd like to see you again. Of course, that was not a difficult response for me to make, but I tried to calm myself down a bit and say, sure, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So we started seeing each other occasionally, long distance, of course. And he came to DC a couple times. We came here a couple of times. And I should note to the Canadians who might be listening today that Paul told me when his Canadian friends were asking him, why are you making these trips to Anguilla? He said, oh, I'm looking at land. I'm looking at property. And he was not one to lie, but he was very private in many ways, and he was not going to reveal why, in fact, he was going. On one of his visits here, we were in the grocery store and ran into Big Man. Big Man for several years had told me, Karen, you will never find another man. You are too strong. So here I am in the grocery store with a guy. So Biggie comes over, lifts up his body, puts out his hand, looks Paul in the eye and says, you better take good care of her. Well, Paul had no problem with that. They became good friends. And it was an interesting welcome for Paul to this island. Paul began building a glass studio in Canada. Well, he talked about building it. And all I needed to hear was construction. So at the end of July in 2004, not having known him for more than 9 months, I retired from the Library of Congress, packed my 700 hardcover signed first edition mystery books, and not much else. Paul came in a van to meet me, and we took off for Canada. I was moving from Washington, D.C. with a population of 700,000 to a village with a population of 200. His friends must have thought that Paul had really lost it. Here he is with an American, no less, and 15 years older than him. My God, Paul, you've truly lost it. But regardless, his dear friends hosted a party for us, a chance for me to meet them and for them to meet me. And it was a great event. We did end up building this studio for him, often in the snow, but we began embarking on a life together filled with risk, adventure, laughter, love, learning, travel, fine dining, and cats. We stepped into each other's lives and created a new one together. Beginning in 2004, we began living here in Anguilla for 5 to 6 months and then returning to Canada for the remainder of the year. When people would ask us, "What do you do on Anguilla?" I would look them in the eye and say, "I live, we live. That's what we do in Anguilla." They were always kind of stunned by that response, and that was not what they expected to hear. Those of you who knew Paul recognized his humor, his talent, his acceptance of others, his comfort with himself, who he was. He was grounded in himself, and when he had a decision to make, he would always go within himself. And whatever the response was, whatever the answer that came to him was, he trusted it, and he acted on it. He was an optimist. Imagine living with an optimist. Much better than a pessimist. But on many occasions when he would say, "Oh, everything's going to be all right," and I would look at him and I'd say, "You are naive. Everything isn't necessarily going to be all right." But that was where he came from. He loved clothes, and here, there are a few people here today wearing some of Paul's colorful shirts that you could not miss, and his colorful Converse sneakers. He had a great imagination and a vision to see things in a piece of driftwood that others could never see. As a result, he created amazing birds, fish, figures. We always had fun standing near tourists here when we were about to embark on the beach. And I'd say to him, "Okay, loudly, what are we looking for today, heads or bodies?" And the tourists would turn around and look at us. We would have a good laugh. He loved music, and his iPod has about 2,000 songs on it. He wrote creatively, and I would say he probably wrote even better than he spoke. As a matter of fact, I have here, one Christmas, he wrote pages of a poem on how I was to find my Christmas present that he had hidden, like a scavenger hunt. He read. He kept track of all the books he read, 365 books in 10 years, mostly here in Anguilla. And he was kind and loved kind bars. We both loved to travel. On the program, you'll see the list of all the places that we traveled. One of the best trips, however, was when he turned 60. He had always wanted to sail across the Atlantic. And all he had to say was sail across the Atlantic. I looked at him, I said, "No way, I'll fly, I'll meet you over there." Well, we realized that was not going to happen. So the month of his birthday in October, I went to him and I said, okay, block off these days, and this is what you're going to pack, and we are going away. I never told him where we were going. We flew out of Toronto in the evening, so he figured we were going to Europe, and in fact we flew into Barcelona. We spent a couple of days there. He figured, well, that's it. One morning I said, come on. We got on a bus, special bus, that took us to the harbor. And there's a picture in the program of him standing with a ticket. I gave him a ticket because we were getting on a cruise to cross the Atlantic. We went to Gibraltar, we went to the Azores, we went to Morocco, we crossed the Atlantic to Bermuda, and then we cruised up, and at 3:30 in the morning hit New York City, went up the Hudson River to the pier, got off, and spent a few days in New York City. Paul had never been to New York City until he met me. Since we met, we went at least 10 times, and he doesn't like big cities, but I would say, where do you want to go for your birthday? New York. In Canada, he would walk to the studio almost daily, a 1-minute walk from the house. And I would say, have a good commute, be careful of the drive. And he would be in his glass studio, on his feet, 6 to 8 hours a day, listening to jazz, happily singing as he lived out his creative self, making stained glass and driftwood. Cursed with a cancer diagnosis in 2016, he had surgery with follow-up treatment and over the years annual checkups. It wasn't until early August of 2021 that we learned he was stage 4 and incurable. Having done all the right things, right diet, exercise, underweight, no smoking, no wine, his parents had lived to be 85 and 93, here he was having just turned 65. It was inconceivable to both of us that this had happened. And not only that, for the previous 2 years he had suffered multiple strokes, hospitalizations, ER visits, rehab, even had open heart surgery, even though his heart was fine. It was only at the end of the past summer that we finally found a medication that stopped those strokes. But the worst damage was that he lost much of his vision, and as a result was no longer able to do his glasswork or his driftwood or to drive a car. Life can be cruel. It was cruel to Paul in the end. Yet during it all, especially these last few months, he never, ever pitied himself. Never. In fact, his concern was me. Karen, please go get some food. Karen, please lie down and rest. Karen, thank you. And he really fought death. I think that he did not really believe it until the end. He had an incident in January. I was convinced this was it, and his spirit would not let go. And as a result, he had 2.5 more months of suffering. But he would, during that time, he would repeatedly say to me, I don't want to leave you. I don't want to leave you. And I would say to him, look, the cats and I are going to be fine, and we'll see you down the road. And unfortunately, I don't think he could ever really believe that. And that was most unfortunate. You know, as much as I have loved Anguilla for 38 years, Paul immediately embedded himself into the community here. We even hiked the perimeter of this island. We took our time doing it. We stretched it out. But being stupid white folks, we always had it out to start hiking for the day at noon and with no water. Really dumb. But that was one of the ways in which he immersed himself into this culture. We lived together for 17 years and never felt the 15-year age difference. We lived a life of adventure and travel and risk and good food and kindness and love. Paul Corfield was a good man. Love is better than anger. Hope is better than fear. Optimism is better than despair. So let us be loving, hopeful, optimistic, and we will change the world. Now I'd like to end this part with a prayer. Birth is a beginning, and death is a destination, and life is a journey, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. So at this point, Paul, no rain. I am going to get into this wonderful boat here and spread Paul's ashes in the sea. And at that time, if all of you would come down to the shore, we have a basket with some petals, and you can grab a petal and throw it in the sea. It will be very brief. And while I'm doing that, the beautiful Rebecca, also known as Queen Bee, is going to sing one of my very favorite songs.
I can only give you love that lasts forever, and the promise to be near each time you call, and the only heart I own for you and you alone. That's all, that's all. I can only give you country walks in springtime, and a hand to hold when leaves begin to fall, and a love whose burning light to warm the winter's night. That's all, that's all. There are those, I am sure, who have told you they would give you the world's for all. All I have is these arms to enfold you, and the love time can never be strong. If you're wondering what I'm asking in return, dear, you'll be glad to know that my demands are small. Say it's me that you'll adore, now and evermore. That's all, that's all. in return, dear. You'll be glad to know that my demands are small. Say it's me that you adore, now and evermore. That's all. Oh, baby, that's all. That's all. We're gonna do it one more time for our good friend Paul. We're gonna miss you. That beautiful smile. I can only give you love that lasts forever, and the promise to be near each time you call. And the only heart I own is for you and you alone. That's all. That's all. I can only give you country walks in springtime, and a hand to hold when leaves begin to fall. Earth was burning light to walk the lonely nights. That's all. That's all. There are those, I am sure, who have told you they would give you the world for a toy. All I have are these arms to enfold you, and a love time can never destroy. If you're wondering what I'm asking in return, dear, you'll be glad to know that my demands are small. Say it's me that you adore, for now and nevermore. Oh, that's all. If you're wondering what I'm asking in return, dear, you'll be glad to know that my demands are small. Say it's me that you'll adore, for now and evermore. That's all. Baby, that's all. Oh, that's all.
From the time we met in Little Harbor, Karen and Paul, you were such beautiful neighbors. From then until now, I found you to be very caring, kind, and loving. Paul, whenever you returned to Anguilla for a visit, you made sure to pass by. You regularly showed love and kindness to the animals around, especially the cats and dogs. Words cannot really describe your love and kindness. I did not realize that your time was so near. Paul, you will be greatly missed. The community of Little Harbor will miss you tremendously. Karen, be of good cheer. Try and be strong. God will always be with you. Rest in peace, dear Paul, until we meet again. Sina. Thank you.